Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Today we are looking at the Breitling for Bentley Continental GT Racing Chronograph, reference A133631. This is an outstanding tribute to the car that made the modern Bentley. That's right, the Continental GT was to Bentley back in 2003 what the Aston Martin DB7 was to Aston, or the Gallardo was to Lamborghini, the borderline usable supercar that took the brand from niche status to something like a mainstream luxury automaker. So, in tribute to the model that made Bentley what it is today, Breitling for Bentley has come out with this Continental GT Racing Chronograph. Now, it's a sport-themed variation on the earlier GT Chronograph, 45 millimeters, so it's a little bit smaller than the traditional 675s and a bit more wearable for that reason. Now, you can see on the wrist, let's face it, 45 millimeters is only smaller in relation to the near 50 millimeter 675s and its ilk in the Breitling for Bentley catalog. This watch wears very comfortably on my wrist, and a big part of that is the multiple faceted natural rubber vulcanized white strap. Now, it's got a gorgeous series of faceted texturing on the outside that give it definition and prevent it from reading as too much of a monolith, but underneath it's completely smooth, very supple, very soft. It's everything you would expect in a high-end sports watch strap. It's comfortable enough to give Hublot a run for its money, and regardless of what you think of Hublot, their straps are very soft and very comfortable. Now, there's not too much that I can say a Breitling for Bentley has in common with a Rolex Datejust, but having just reviewed a Rolex Datejust 16234 with a lacquered white dial, I can say that this Continental GT Racing Chronograph has a very similar treatment. Now, the dial is glossy, almost wet in appearance. Now, the chapter ring, that dished outer rayhot that's part of the bidirectional circular slide rule bezel, that is a sort of silver metallic, but the dial center itself, from roughly the minute track inboard, looks wet, it looks depth, it has luster to it. When I say it has depth, I mean it almost looks like you could stick your hand into it, like a pail of wet paint or water. That's how much gleam it's got in person. Very beautiful, nicely done. The applied elements really set themselves off against that glossy base. Now, all of the indices, the chapter rings of the subdials have been diamond polished for that same high polished, glossy, gleaming look, and the watch comes alive in direct light. The same is true of the hands and the chronograph seconds hand with its shock of red at one extremity and the Breitling anchor logo at the other. A very practical watch. This watch includes the stopwatch chronograph function, which is great for timing just about anything from periods in between meetings to food that you're cooking, or perhaps if you've ordered a hot dog on Miami Beach, where this watch would be right in its element. At the grill, you know exactly how long it's going to take. But the bottom line is that it pairs that chronograph functionality with a day date at 3 o'clock, just below the applied Breitling winged logo. The day date is a feature you can use every day. From writing emails to writing letters to quickly quoting friends the day or the date, this is one of those features that seems fairly self-evident until you find yourself referencing it constantly. These are the everyday complications, and with an automatic winding Breitling caliber 13 inside, chronometer certified, this really is an everyday watch with set it and forget it practicality. If you were to put this on a black strap or a bracelet, it would visually tone it down a little bit and make it more versatile for day-to-day use, but given that Watch You Want is located in Miami, this watch with that gorgeous natural rubber white strap and matching dial just looks like it's ready to hit South Beach. I wouldn't change a thing about it. Now, Breitling does show some discretion in brushing some facets of the case. Now, the tops of the lugs as well as the tops of the case itself are brushed in contrast with the polished bezel, which is knurled on the top, and the sides or flanks of the case feature a corresponding polish. So there is some nuance here. There is differentiation moving from the knurling to the polished section of the bezel to the brushed tops of the case and lugs to the polished flanks and polished chronograph pushers, crown guards, and crown. There is some differentiation here that breaks up the sheer mass of the 45 millimeter case. Now, you can see on my wrist, which is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, the watch sits quite comfortably. I would say that if you don't get along with the really huge Breitling for Bentleys, but you like the look, this is the one that could be the difference maker for you, because toned down just a bit to 45 millimeters, you can see on my wrist, which is below average in size, the lugs do not overhang on the sides. The watch doesn't want a hula hoop, and because it's got this gorgeous full single deployant trigger activated clasp, it's got a counterweight that prevents it from being top heavy, so it doesn't want to capsize either. Now I do want to focus on the quality of this deployant because it's a big highlight for me. Now it's brushed, so it is discreet in appearance. You can see that brushing takes the attention away from the clasp when it's on the wrist and allows the attention to remain focused on the watch head. But this clasp deserves more than a shout out. Now you can see with twin trigger actuation, one trigger, it's not enough to open. But if you press both triggers, it opens easily. I prefer that over a clamshell. I prefer it by far over a friction fit, because you have no doubt that this is going to stay shut and stay on your wrist. Another nice feature is that it has a micro adjustment. Now this is designed to be cut to length, but there's plenty of life left in this uncut strap, and you can see that this little push button slider allows you to make micro adjustments within the clasp to change to suit whether your wrist is expanding in the heat, contracting in the cold, if you're undergoing, intense physical activity and your wrist size changes, or if you just want to give the watch as a gift, you have sizing certainty and convenience with this micro adjust that's built into the clasp itself. Now the caseback of the watch, because I get a lot of questions about the casebacks on watches that do not have sapphire caseback displays, I removed that little protective sticker that we apply here at the company. You can see the original Continental GT. Now the Continental GT, like I said, was a breakthrough car for Bentley, because being based on the Volkswagen Group's D platform, which it shared with the Volkswagen Phaeton and the Audi A8, it was everyday usable, comfortable, reliable, very quick. The original featured a twin turbocharged V12, W12 in Bentley speak, so it was something unlike anything Bentley had ever produced before, and it made Bentley more accessible to those who weren't willing to put up with the idiosyncrasies of boutique cars that needed constant service, constant maintenance, some of it unscheduled. To this day, the Continental remains the engine that propels Bentley forward, and I may say by extension, Breitling for Bentley. So in a lot of ways, the fact that Breitling for Bentley as a partnership still exists is due to the continued success of Bentley as a brand. All of that success in the modern era is built on the Continental GT and its derivatives. Make no mistake, although it's a Bentley, it's still a Breitling, which means that you have a COSC certified chronometer caliber inside. Now this is the Breitling caliber 13B, so automatic winding based on a Valjoux 7750 base with a 42-hour power reserve, very robust, as tough as a Bentley, arguably. But what sets this one apart is that in addition to having that COSC certified chronometer engine, you can use it in conjunction with a special automotive-themed bidirectional rotating bezel. Now, if you're familiar with this from the Navitimer, the best guidance I could give you is that the automotive version, which is calibrated to give you things like hours, minutes, and seconds, it almost works in reverse in terms of how the multiplication and division works. So check out the flash animation on Breitling's website to give you an in-depth guide to using this one. But it has that traditional bi-element deluxe bidirectional calibrated bezel, because it has this little pinion in the side, so that as you move the bezel itself, the inner rotating portion, the chapter ring, the dished rehaut, moves at a different speed than the rest of the bezel, so it's actually internally geared and bigger than the original Navitimer unit to make it easier to use and more dynamic in practice. You can use this to calculate anything from tips at restaurants to exchange rates to, let's face it, if you are the type who participates in motorsports, you can calculate rates on track and important motorsports data if you are, for instance, driving a Bentley in competition. But even if you're not, this Breitling for Bentley Continental GT Racing Chronograph is a light-hearted, high-quality tribute to an important model in Bentley's history, and as a Breitling, you're getting the solidity, the substance, the fit, finish, and detailing that you would expect from the Solothurn watchmaker. Check out this Breitling for Bentley Continental GT Racing Chronograph, reference 133A13361 on our website, Watch You Want.